Hey, Ryan here. I wanted to give you an update on my Red Bull Ares inspired plane. This morning my wife and I went out to the field. I did another test flight and it went well. I made a bunch of little modifications here and there on the plane before these test flights. I closed up some of the holes in the nose. I put a piece on the nose that made it more streamlined. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I may or may not leave it. So I put a little rightward thrust on it, probably just under 2 degrees, because it does look like it's affected by torque of the motor. Once I correct for that though, after launching, it doesn't seem to do that during flight. It's pretty stable. Oh yeah, one of the other things I added was winglets. I put little winglets with a low profile on the end of the wings, just in case it was suffering from wingtip stall. We went out to the field. I made a quick adjustment to the underside of the canopy because I noticed that the piece of foam that was still on the bottom of the canopy that was actually butting up against the wires to the battery, so it probably was affecting how well the canopy was seated. That I didn't notice until today, which means it was probably doing it the last time I flew. Before I start though, I did notice that the motor was a little weird. Just free spinning, it was a little stiff. And I didn't think anything of it though because the motor did spin up with the throttle. So went out there, I throttled it up and threw it. And I'll let you watch the video and then I'll talk about it afterwards. Oh, and I'm sorry, there's 2 of these videos and we had some trouble with the autofocus. So there are some times there where it goes out of focus. So sorry about that.
Oh, it flies better already. A little pitchy though. Now it's going. The line's nice though. Good. It torque rolled a little bit on the launch, but it doesn't sound right. I think something's wrong with the motor.
Yeah, could you replace it?
I could, yeah. Because I think when I dropped it on its nose the last time, I think it may have. See how fast it goes. It's not too fast. It's agile though.
Oh God.
I'm just gliding it.
I could hear it whooshing.
It has a lot of power too, which I didn't think it would.
What?
What is happening?
What?
I have no control right now.
Oh.
So I was really excited. The first flight actually felt good. It felt like a plane. Unlike the last time I flew the plane, it didn't feel right at all. This time it didn't want to pitch up on me. The first flight I made the comment that it was pitchy, and it was. I kept having to pull back on the stick. It landed. Turns out that I didn't trim the elevator. The elevator was actually down a little bit past level, so that's why it was a little pitchy. I wanted to do a little more flying just to get a feel for it, make sure it was trimmed. I came back around to land just to see how it would do close to the ground. But when I flared at the end, it just seemed to float forever. So the wings definitely have a lot of lift. So the second flight I wanted to push it a little harder. I wanted to see how fast it would go. and I threw it again, and that's when I made the comment that it was suffering from the torque roll, something that I had seen in all of the test flights. But again, it was a stable flight. I was under control. I turned around, I wanted to climb a little bit and do a dive. So, you know, I did a dive with no throttle, and it was pretty quick. Then I also made the comment about the motor. Something sounded weird, and I kind of noticed this on the ground. It sounded like the prop was biting the air, and I assumed that was just because it was close to that nose piece I put on, which it wasn't that far away. It was probably an inch or less away from that nose piece, so it's possible that's what it was. But I wanted to bring it around and go full throttle to see how fast it would go, and I went full throttle and it didn't even seem to go any faster. So I thought that maybe that was just the way it was. Granted, it has a 10 by 4.5 prop, which isn't really built for speed, so that could have been it as well. So at that point, I decided to turn it around and bring it back in for a landing, and I'm flying over the field here. Our flying field has farmland around it, and I think it's cotton that they grow there. So I'm flying over this field, and I'm trying to bring it back to the runway, to where we are, and it didn't want to turn around. It was just the weirdest thing. I can't explain what it was doing, but I don't know, it was weird. I tried to give it more throttle because I saw that it was beginning to lose altitude, and it wasn't doing much. I didn't have any aileron control, but I had elevator control a little bit, and it just wouldn't come back. And I'm thinking, great, this is getting farther over this field that is full of all these plants that there's no rows between them. If I have to go in there and get that plane, it's not going to be fun. But it ended up falling. It went back there so far. I'm not going to leave this, especially with the battery in it, in the middle of some farmer's field. So I took the long, very short walk through this field, and very careful walk, because these plants are above my waist and I can't see the ground. So I'm being careful to split apart plants so I can see where I'm walking and see that I'm not stepping on something or in a hole. And it's so funny because I was walking out there with the transmitter in my hand, and I decided to give it to her because I didn't need it, and I should know better that if I'm looking for a plane, I'm gonna want to have the transmitter to make the servos move so I can hear it. My conclusion after that was it was a motor. I thought it was the motor initially because it had been acting weird. On the first flight, just before I launched the plane, there was this moment where I almost lost it before I even threw it. And I was pushing the throttle up, and I didn't even get halfway, and all of a sudden it had this sudden jolt of power, and it wanted to jump out of my hand. That should have been an indicator to me that something was awry, but it didn't seem that big of a deal. I thought maybe I just wasn't paying attention to my throttle or something. The fact that I put the plane nose first into the ground 3 times should have been an indicator that maybe the motor should be looked at or replaced. I got home and I wanted to run the motor to see what it was doing. I noticed when I got past about 3/4 throttle, the motor lurched forward. I didn't know if this was the mount or what. It wasn't the plane because I was holding on to it, so I tried it again and I saw it happen again. So then I took that nose piece off and I inspected the motor, and I saw that the housing, the outer housing of the motor, was a little loose, and if I pulled on it, it would move out probably by about 1 to 2 millimeters, which may not seem like a lot, but my other motors are a lot tighter than that, and they hardly move or don't move at all, at least laterally. I gotta replace it. I'll rebuild the plane and give it some better flying time, but I'm happy with this. I also want to put a 4-cell in it with a smaller prop to see how fast it can go under that setup. I'm not sure what prop size I'm going to use yet. I have to get the motor first and then see what prop sizes are recommended for that. But that's it. Thank you so much for taking a look at this. Thank you so much for taking a look at this. I really appreciate the support on the article I put on Flight Test. If I update the build plans, which I probably will, I will update them in this article, but I'll also make a note of it in the second article, so that way if you go to that one instead of this one, you'll know. Oh, and also, if any of you build this and you noticed any unfavorable tendencies, please let me know. This will be a work in progress for a long time, as long as I want it to be, basically. because I will bring this plane with me every time I go to the field, just because I really want to see what it's capable of. And it survived 5 of my test flights, especially when it couldn't fly. So, you know, I feel like I owe it to this plane to completely destroy it at least once. Anyway, thank you so much. Until next time.